What the Auburn Tigers pulled off over the last 48 hours should worry the rest of the SEC.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers. I mean, I think it should be a national storyline with what they've been able to accomplish over the last 2 days, adding 3 incredible additions to their defensive front. So much so, I think it adds an extra win to their schedule. We'll touch on that later. We'll also do a deep dive on Isaiah Raikes as Locked On Aggies host Andrew Stefaniak will join the show. Let's just go in chronological order here. We all know about adding Blidi, the former Indiana and former Texas Tech defensive lineman. I think he's going to start at the 3 technique. If not, it'll be Gage Keys 1, him 2 at that 3 technique spot, and it offers so much depth. But now all of a sudden, you look at a guy like Raikes. Isaiah Raikes spent several years at Texas A&M, transferred to USC in January, went through spring, entered the portal again. So didn't play for USC. But this is a guy who I don't know if he starts at that nose tackle spot or if that's definitely where he's going to be. When you look at where all he played while at Texas A&M, which, by the way, he played for the same defensive coordinator that Auburn has now, DJ Durkin, it seemed like it was very game plan dependent on where he played. There'd be some games where he played a lot at nose tackle. There'd be some games where he played a lot at the 3 technique. And when you look at the way Auburn's defensive line is constructed, it seems like Jason Jones is the guy at that nose, Trill Carter right behind him, the former Texas player. And then you look at the 3 technique now with Blidi and Gage Keys. Malik Blockton's in there somewhere as well. How does this all fit in? Is he kind of going to be a guy who can rotate back and forth and offer depth at multiple places? We saw that a little bit with Lawrence Johnson. We saw that a little bit with Messiah Nasili Kite, more so with the 3 technique and the defensive end. Does having Raikes there allow a guy like Blidi to also be a backup 5 technique to Keldrick Falk if they don't feel like other guys are ready, like some of these true freshmen like Amaris Williams? I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, now we get to ask that question and say, man, isn't it nice to know that you're not just slotting in some of these dudes and hoping it works out? Because that's the difference with this coaching staff versus what we saw during the potato famine and also with what we saw, I love the guy, but under the Gus Malzahn era. Because we've now got a track record here. We've got a track record here of when Auburn has weaknesses in the roster. What does this coaching staff do? They make it a priority to fix the dang thing. When Hugh Freeze and this staff came in, it was offensive line. Total makeover. The last calendar year, it's been wide receiver. They tried to do it during the spring portal a year ago. It didn't work. They're like, screw it. Let's just do it through high school and make sure we get some more solidified guys in the December portal. So they did. They get the Freeze 4. They almost get the Freeze 5. They definitely get the Freeze 4 with Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Malcolm Simmons, Bryce Kane. And then they go out and get who I think might be a diamond in the rough. I was wrong on this guy, but Sam Jackson, and then obviously Robert Lewis via the transfer portal. And so now they say, okay, we fixed the receivers. I think we're going to add a little pop to the offense. We kept the running back room intact so far. The offensive line, like we've planned that. Everything's looking good there. Wow, we're thin on the defensive line. We're thin on the defensive line. Can we fix that? And yes, they did it. They did it in 2 days. The third guy that they added that we haven't gotten to yet because we were kind of focusing on the interior, which was the biggest concern. The second biggest concern was, okay, McLeod's a pass rusher. We hope Keldrick Falk is a pass rusher. We need to see him take that next step forward. Kind of had a quiet spring. They need another dude. And just, we're lucky that this just freak, this athletic prince of a man, enters the portal from Arkansas State. Keyron Crawford was my favorite player to enter the transfer portal this cycle. And I'm not just saying that because he was kind of linked to Auburn the entire time. Not just saying it for that reason. This kid is raw. This kid, I mean, he looks like an edge defender that the NFL would want. Just like passing the eye test. The production is incredible. And this guy, like, he is put on the field to rush the passer. Obviously, he committed to Auburn yesterday. I think he was supposed to do it today, but he just did it. He just signed, and Auburn football put out the social media post, and it was great. It was a great moment for all of us. And so then what does that mean? Because this is a guy with 2 years left of eligibility. You look at Blidi and you look at Raikes. These are seniors. You look at Keyron Crawford. He's a junior. And I love this for several reasons. One, I think Crawford, I think the sky's the limit for him. I think adding Raikes and Blidi, they raise your floor. I think Crawford raises your floor and your ceiling because he is exceptional. I mean, I really think they got Jalen McLeod 2.0. I think they did it back-to-back years, and they get to overlap for a season. But Crawford has 2 years left of eligibility. Could he take a huge step forward and be a draft pick next year? He could be. He could be like McLeod. Like McLeod, if he wanted to, could be getting drafted this weekend. I think if he would have gone pro, he would be getting a call from an NFL team in a few days. He's not, which is great. And I think it's going to be ultimately better for him because he's going to be a stud this year. But now if you're Crawford, you get to not be the main guy. You're not going to get double teamed. I don't think. We'll see. But you can't double team him and McLeod, assuming they're going to be on the field at the same time. And then at the point of, okay, if it's Crawford and then the other side is Keldrick Falk, we'll see what offenses do. But the timing of this, McLeod runs out of eligibility after this season. Crawford does not. And all of a sudden now your pecking order is Crawford and then Jamonta Waller and Joe Phillips. Okay, you feel good about three guys, and we'll see if they're true sophomores or redshirt freshmen. We'll see what happens with Jamonta Waller and Joe Phillips going into next season. But who will be a freshman then? J.J. Falk. And all of a sudden, you have a system in place. You've built depth. And this long-term vision of what Hugh Freeze and this coaching staff are trying to build, that's what it looks like. It looks like McLeod to Crawford, to Waller and Phillips, then to J.J. Falk, and then to whoever else they want to bring in the following class. This is what the Alabamas and the Georgias have done to be successful for so long. And you're seeing it at other positions too. I mean, you can point to the offensive line like the two deep. It's like, okay, this guy's probably going to start at left tackle next year. Okay, Connor Liu's going to be here for a few years. There's going to be guys that can compete for these guard spots. You see the path to playing time for some of these young guys because Auburn has a coaching staff that's actually thinking ahead, and they showed the desire and poise and savvy to win now versus also balancing the fact of like they need to win in the future. And I don't think the fact that they got the guys that can win now, but also manage the eligibility aspect of it, I don't think it's by accident that Philip Blidi and Isaiah Raikes are just here for a season because they can now go to Malik Blockton and TJ Lindsey and Darren Reed and say, hey guys, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Your role next year is not going to be altered by this because they'll be gone. They'll be gone. I just think the balance, this is what roster management looks like. This is what roster management looks like, not only for winning in 2024, because I do think Auburn picked up an extra game. We'll talk about that in a second. But as far as making sure everybody in this transfer portal era, you want everybody to feel loved. You want everybody to feel happy. You don't want to take playing time or anything away from anybody else, especially your talented freshmen in this 2024 class. It was a masterclass. What we've seen the last 2 days as far as Auburn revamping a position group, masterclass. Hugh Freeze. Shout out to the support staff, off-field staff, Will Redmond. I'm sure he was involved in all of this. What a day. What a day for everyone. I think Auburn wins an extra game now this season. We'll talk about that in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, whether it's for sports, whether it's for the theater, whether it's for a concert, it doesn't matter. Game Time has you covered. And look, they've got last-minute tickets. They are known for last-minute tickets. So if you're like, you know what, I want to drive over to Atlanta for a Braves game, or y'all listen to this show from all over the place, whatever your local team is, and you're like, man, I would love to go check out whatever concert. Well, Game Time, their tickets, they go down in price the closer you get to the start of the event. So you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And right now, it's playoff time in the NBA. It's really the only time I watch the NBA. It's very fun in the playoffs. The NHL, haven't watched a hockey game in years, but if I wanted to bet on it, I could over at FanDuel. And obviously, the MLB is in full swing. Those Braves, think they've forgotten how to lose, folks. Think they've forgotten how to lose. FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. I think when you look at what Auburn did over the past 2 days, some people poked at me because I labeled yesterday's show as a big win. Auburn won the weekend. Auburn, I think, won the last 48 hours. I don't think there's any question about it. But not only because they made the roster better both this year and next year, both directly and indirectly, but I think they won an extra game. I think what they did to revamp the defensive line earns them an extra win. I'm going to be honest. FanDuel has Auburn set as 7.5 total wins going into the season. I was kind of hugging the under at 6-6 or 7-5, just because I was concerned. I was concerned about the defensive line, not the starters, but the depth. And when Auburn has that brutal stretch of Georgia and the 2 road games to Missouri and Kentucky, and then having to play A&M, then Bama, I mean, it's just a brutal stretch for anybody. And Auburn didn't really have the depth in the defensive front that I felt comfortable with to say, yeah, they're not going to get worn down over the course of it. Now it looks totally different. And it doesn't matter who's starting or who's rotating where or who's at nose or who's at 3 or who's at the 5 technique. You feel better about all of it. You feel better about all of it. And so when you look at these toss-up games on Auburn's schedule in 2024, Oklahoma comes to mind. I think it's interesting because this is going to be an offense that's going to be playing its first time on the road in the SEC. They'll play Tennessee the week before. They're either going to be on an emotional high or they're going to be crushed, and the narrative's going to be like, oh, man, if we don't beat Auburn on the road, we're going to start 0-2 in SEC play, and everybody's going to make fun of us, which will be hilarious. Hopefully that happens. We'll see, but hopefully that happens. But they're replacing all 5 starters on the offensive line, and they've got a new quarterback. Well, talk about straight-up matchup. I feel way better about the matchup now between Auburn's defensive line and Oklahoma's offensive line. Are you kidding me? Especially with the pass rushing situation? Yeah, you feel a lot better about that. Another toss-up game is Kentucky. Auburn goes on the road to Lexington. And a lot of Auburn fans that I've talked to, and I don't want to speak for Daryl, but I think Daryl, who comes on this show twice a week, he sees that as a win for Auburn. I have it as a toss-up game. I'm closer now from these past 2 days because of what Auburn's done rebuilding their defensive line to saying it's a win. I don't trust Vandergriff as a passer just because we haven't seen it. And I think Kentucky's going to have to run the football to be successful in 2024. And Auburn's rush defense got better this week. So I think that one's an important one. Missouri, we'll certainly see what happens there. I think that was going to be a tough win regardless. But another interesting one, and we talk about it with Andrew Stefaniak in a moment. But that game where Auburn hosts Texas A&M towards the end of the season, that's a toss-up game to me. And you think about, okay, well, is Texas A&M going to be able to throw the ball consistently in Jordan Hare Stadium? My gut says no. But we'll certainly see. Just the matchup. DJ Durkin's going to want that one really, really bad, you'd have to think. And it's going to be, no matter what, it's going to be compared to the Cadillac game. And so this coaching staff's going to want to, welcome the fan base and say, hey, we're doing this for you again. We've got Texas A&M at home. We could do this. And I just think this defensive line is going to help with that. DJ Durkin, that one's going to be special to him. He's going to circle it. Former DC at Texas A&M, as well as Isaiah Raikes, former Texas A&M defensive lineman. I just think this one's going to mean a little bit more. And so to me, you look at all of these games that are toss-ups, I feel a little bit better about all of them. And if you can just win two of those, Auburn's looking at 8-4 or 9-3. I'm not quite to 9-3 yet. I am to 8-4 now. I just can't get over Keyron Crawford. I mean, this is just a guy who, there was a picture posted of him of several, it seems like everybody caught wind of it, and they're putting in predictions and crystal balls and all of that. And there's a picture of him in practice gear of Arkansas State, and it's just like a t-shirt, and his sleeves are rolled up or they're cut off or whatever. And this dude's arms and this guy's frame, it's just he doesn't belong at Arkansas State. No disrespect to the Sun Belt, but he didn't belong there. He is where he belongs. And this is the beauty of what I think the transfer portal is meant to be, is, okay, maybe there's a kid who's under recruited out of high school, or maybe a late bloomer, late to just trying football, goes to a G5 school and says, you know what, I'm better than this. Jalen McLeod did it at App State a year ago. And you get a Keyron Crawford. It's just what a day. What a day yesterday was. And there's going to be look, if you're watching this, you love Auburn. Or I don't know why else you would watch this if that was the case. So to me, there's going to be a lot of folks that say, well, it's too early to get excited. And you tell them, no, it's not. No, it's not. Because I'm going to circle back to what we talked about at the start of the show. This coaching staff is doing things differently at Auburn than any other staff has. Yes, they have access to being able to use NIL to recruit. Yes, the transfer portal. Only Harsin had that opportunity beforehand. Whatever. That was a joke. But they're still seeing needs and actually doing something about it. I mean, how many years did we go with Gus Malzahn where it's just get some tackles and we'd be pretty good? And they just couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. And I don't know if it was an effort thing or what, but the product is all that matters. And there was no offensive tackles involved in the final product that they put on the field. And this staff, man, there's just something about Hugh Freeze and this staff that he's put together where he has figured out, we need this. Let's go and get it. And they've done it consistently. They've done it every single window. They have been able to address the issues of the roster. Hats off to him. Wesley Steiner enters the portal. I like Wesley Steiner. I've only talked to him twice. Seems like a nice guy. I wish him nothing but the best. Does kind of make you wonder, okay, what's next for Auburn in the transfer portal? I think a linebacker or just another defender would make sense, whether it's a defensive back or a linebacker. There's been some chatter about the defensive backs just because there's so much depth there. Other teams are kind of waiting in the water for somebody to kind of jump on in. So we'll see on that. And then I do think they'll get a receiver. I think they're going to get another option in the passing game to kind of help out Peyton Thorne. And I guess Hugh Freeze, everybody involved in the offense. So we'll see. Some of you guys may be asking, where's Charlie 5? Long running joke about his internet. The dude literally broke his internet. Give him a hard time on it. That'll make his day even better. All right, coming up, a deep dive with Isaiah Raikes, or on Isaiah Raikes, not with him, not yet anyway. That's coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. I've been told I'm a competitive person. Do you think that's true? I do. I have a competitive side. We all do. Let's be honest. And my competitive side right now is a huge fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great choice of Monopoly, where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is you can mess with your friends. You can charge them rent in iconic properties, just like Monopoly. You can heist their vaults of riches for yourself. And of course, the leaderboards, that's always the fun part. That's where the competitive side comes out. So check it out. Get in the game. Join your friends. Download Monopoly Go. Now free on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Joining us now here on Locked On Auburn, it's Andrew Stefaniak, the host of Locked On Aggies, which is funny because, of course, Auburn picks up Isaiah Raikes' commitment. All the graphics are going to say he's from USC, but really, he's from Texas A&M. He was at USC for 5 minutes. So, Andrew, big picture, just kind of looking at what Raikes did for the Aggies defense, for DJ Durkin's defense last year. Your biggest takeaway for what kind of impact this kid could have?
You know, when it comes to the impact he's going to have at Auburn, I think that he's going to be a guy that's in the two deep. I don't see him taking over a starting role for the Auburn Tigers. I don't see that happening, but he is a really reliable depth piece. He was at Texas A&M for 4 years. He played a lot of snaps. He never was really the guy that was in the starting lineup. He was always a two-deep guy who mixed in and out of the lineup, played his role, played it well. And I think he's a guy that's going to come in and do that at Auburn. I mean, listen, the PFF grades, the numbers are good. The numbers are good.
Sure.
But I think he's a dude who can come in and can help an Auburn defensive line that it seems like is a problem for Hugh Freeze and this staff.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how Auburn wants to use them because, once again, same defensive coordinator, so we've got a pretty good idea of what Durkin thinks of him. Played over 250 snaps last year for the Aggies. A lot of them were at nose. A lot of them were at the defensive tackle spots of three techniques. And to me, Auburn needs a little bit of both. So maybe he's kind of a guy who is a backup nose and a backup three technique / defensive tackle. I don't know. Auburn needs depth. 100%. I agree with you. I think he could be a really solid depth piece for the Tigers. This guy just doesn't strike me as a dude who wants to sit on the bench. That's kind of my only pushback on that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That, nobody wants where he's at in his career. Nobody wants to go and be in the two deep somewhere. But he's just been a guy who, once again, he's always been okay with his role. He's never seemed like a guy that's concerned about that. I mean, he's happy with his 30 snaps a game, 25, 35 snaps a game. I don't think that's not as much of a concern for me when it comes to Raikes going to Auburn as I think it might be for you. I think he's going to be happy in a role. And he's going to compete for it. I'm not saying he's coming in I'll be in the two deep and that's fine.
Yeah, I hope he does.
He's going to make a run at this. And I think the flexibility he brings, as you just discussed, it's so valuable because he has played all over the defensive line during his time at Texas A&M. He's played the three technique. He's played nose, 6'2", 320-pound, big dude, low to the ground. He's a guy that can play all over the defensive line. He's a little bit quick for his size, and he's been really good stopping the run. Last year, his rush defense grade on PFF was a 77.3. His overall defensive grade at Texas A&M, and a pretty good Texas A&M defense, especially in the front seven, was a 72.3, which was the 7th best grade on the entire defense. I mean, I don't know Auburn's PFF defensive grades off the top of my head, but I think you would take a 72.3 right now.
Well, and let's think back to when you and I previewed the Auburn A&M game this past season. The mismatch was where? It was in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and then they lined up, and Texas A&M controlled the trenches on both sides of the ball. And Raikes isn't why Auburn lost to Texas A&M last year, but the fact of the matter is, like, Auburn is getting better on both sides of the ball in the trenches because they're getting guys like Raikes, who's going to play a similar role for Auburn, we think, this upcoming season as he did for A&M last year.
You're right. And it's funny. You and I were joking. We were going, oh, so where he lined up was game plan dependent. We both went, yeah, but the game plan was made by the guy who's going to be making the game plan at Auburn.
Right.
So, it's a little bit funny, but just the key for him, and ironically, Auburn statistically was one of his worst games of the year. He had his tackle grade in that game was like a 28. But what
the
he's
force that is Jarquez Hunter. He doesn't have to tackle Jarquez anymore.
Yeah, you rather, if you can't tackle him, join him is what I always say. But looking at what Raikes brings across this defensive line, I think he's a guy that, I'll be honest with you, I think he's going to make a run at the starting spot. And I'll tell you this, you often talk about players who join a roster in the spring and you go, it's going to be tough to learn the system. How are these guys going to adapt to this new system? That's not an issue here, of course, as we've discussed. He was with Durkin last year at A&M, and then he was at USC for about 7.5 minutes. He got off his plane. It was the Homer Simpson's dad meme. He put his hat down, turned around, walked back out.
That's right.
But, I don't think he's going to be a guy that has any issue acclimating because of the fact that he was playing with Durkin. And once again, this is just a guy, if I'm an Auburn fan, I'm very, very, very happy that Raikes plays for my football team now. And I'll tell you this, Texas A&M was upset to lose Raikes, but you got to remember, we were dealing with a coaching change. So you lost a lot of guys. It wasn't like this is the same staff and he left. And we were like, oh, why did he leave? It was during a staff change. So that just happens. It's a player. I'd take him back right now if we could.
Yeah, well, that leads me to my next question. I've talked to a few USC folks, and they didn't seem too shaken up that he left. It was almost like, well, he was here for 5 minutes, and I was actually corrected. He said 3.5 minutes. It's like, okay, that's probably true. That's probably true, and I understand why you feel that way. How did A&M feel when he left? Or was it just kind of another guy that left because so many Aggies entered the portal kind of around the same time?
I think you got to put it in perspective. Walter Nolan, new Ole Miss defensive lineman. Yes, I was a little bit more upset Walter Nolan's leaving or Evan Stewart's leaving than I was Isaiah Raikes. But once again, you can't teach veteran. You can't. He's played a lot of college football, and that is what matters right now. I know that's what Auburn's looking for, because I know Auburn, that recruiting class was incredibly gifted. They've got a lot of guys that are young. Sure. You need a guy who can just come in, give you a little bit for a little while these guys develop. Raikes is a home run for Auburn because he brings exactly what you're looking for. Coach Freeze did a good job. He didn't go get a young guy that is going to a young guy that might upset some of your young defensive linemen. He went and got a guy who, isn't going to be here all that long, and he's going to come in. He's going to play a role for your team. And once again, if he wins a starting job, it's not something I'd be upset about as an Auburn fan. If I was an Auburn fan, I would say Raikes won this job because he's a talented football player, not because the other players there aren't good. And I think he's capable of doing that.
If he starts somewhere on this defensive line for Auburn, you talked about how he was kind of game plan dependent. We're looking at snap counts on PFF right now. There'd be some games where he played more at nose, and there were some games where he played more at these three technique spots. And he lined up at end some.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but some. If you had to guess, okay, hey, he's a starter, he wins a starting job, would you predict it being at the nose or the three technique?
He's always been a nose to me. I would say nose.
6'2", 320 screams nose guard.
It screams nose. It screams I'm low to the ground, and this center's got to push me, and I'm not going to rack up stats. Yeah. I'm going to be large and take up space. And, that's his job. It's what he's always screamed to me, but he's done a good job at the three technique. I mean, he's done fine there. It's, the PFF grade, the numbers, they aren't bad out there. It's just, I think that if he wants to be an NFL player, how he's going to do that is going to be playing the nose, in my opinion, just at his rate.
Yeah. So from the Auburn perspective, just to kind of zoom out a little bit away from Raikes and just to, the 2024 college football season, Andrew, that A&M game where your Aggies come to Jordan-Hare Stadium towards the end of the season, like that's a big game. That's going to be a huge game. If Auburn, that could be the difference between either of our teams winning 7 or 8 games or 8 or 9 games, depending on how the season goes. And if things fall the right way, that is a huge one. It's there in Jordan-Hare. It's late in the season, so maybe that gives Elko more time to get his team where he wants to be and kind of bought in. What's the mindset on your side of the aisle for that game that comes up towards the end of the season?
Well, making the move back to Jordan-Hare, I have to say this. I think Texas A&M fans are very happy that Coach Cadillac Williams has made the move to the NFL because everybody is still remembering that game and the horrificness of all of that.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I'll tell you this. I have said over at Locked On Aggies for weeks, for months, that Auburn game is the most important game on Texas A&M's schedule. And I'll tell you why. If you look at Texas A&M's schedule, they're more challenging games. So Texas, LSU, Missouri, and Notre Dame to open up the season are all at Kyle Field, all in College Station. On the road, you play a bunch of teams I'm not concerned about. South Carolina, Mississippi State, Florida, and Auburn are the games that I don't want to go to the Swamp. I don't want to go to Jordan-Hare. And the number one of those concerning games to me is playing Auburn on the road. Weird things happen in that stadium. I don't want to go there. I don't want to be any part of it.
Yeah.
And so that I've said, and it's not going to be I think, no disrespect to Auburn. Auburn's going to be a fine football team, but I'm more concerned when it comes to talent on the field with the, LSUs and the Notre Dames of the world in Texas than I am Auburn. But when it comes to playing there in that environment in a crucial road game, when it's going to come to winning 8-9 football games, this is the number one game I'm concerned about for Texas A&M Aggies.
Yeah, there's a handful of toss-up games on the Auburn side that you just mentioned, similar for A&M, and A&M is obviously one of them. Going to Kentucky, going to Missouri is going to be tricky. So there's and then Oklahoma and Arkansas at home. If Auburn can win most of those games, all of a sudden you're looking at a 9 or a 10-win potential season if they're able to take care of business there. So, yeah, we'll talk about that one again for sure over the course of the offseason. Andrew Stefaniak, thank you so much for your time, my friend. How can people check out everything you've got going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on X at Andrew Stefaniak and check out Little Locked On Aggies. You and I will have a preview for the game coming up. If you're ever interested in Texas A&M news, if you want to talk about a really, really good baseball team, then go check out Locked On Aggies.
Yeah, I wish we could say the same. Has not been our season on the diamond, sadly. Thank you so much to all of our guests on today's show. Please like the video, please subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.